Today we are playing Trails in the Sky FC, a game I've been obsessed with for over a decade. You might know this game as the first entry in a sprawling epic, but it has also garnered a less glamorous reputation for being a bumpy start. The homework you have to get out the way before you can get to the really good stuff. So with the release of a shiny new remake, is it the fate of the original to forever be superseded by games with a shinier presentation and flashy action? Well, I certainly hope not, because the original Trails in the Sky is incredibly charming on its own. For lack of a better way to put it, we often shorthand this as good vibes or atmosphere, but that's pretty hard to quantify. To me, this game has the appeal of a small-scale story, an amazing attention to detail, and an unwavering commitment to its narrative. It's a vision of what an RPG can be that I don't think I've seen replicated anywhere. Crucially, I don't think there's any one killer feature that sells the game. It's a thoroughly balanced experience that relies heavily on the context and framing of what you're doing. It can be hard to put a finger on why the game is so good without resorting to just recounting the entire game. So, you know what? Let's do that. Let's go together on this journey so we can untangle the wonderful experience of playing Trails in the Sky. We begin the story late at night. A young girl named Estelle is waiting for her father to come home. When he does return, he's brought a present, but it's an unusual one, a young boy her age. The boy is injured, and when he comes to, he questions why Estelle's father spared him, clearly baffled that he's been brought into a stranger's home. Estelle pesters the boy to drop the hostile act and ask for his name, as the old memory fades to black and transitions into an opening cinematic. Oh, well, it was supposed to. I was just treated to a black screen with the music playing on top of it. Well, we're not missing much at least. We skip forward a few years with a now teenage Estelle waking up to the sound of a harmonica playing. The young boy is Joshua, and he was adopted into the family. These two are going to be our main protagonists, and this short opening does a wonderful job of introducing them. Estelle is cheerful, outgoing, and somewhat childish, while Joshua is more aloof and level-headed. Where Estelle would rather be out fishing or training martial arts, Joshua is the type to wake up early to play the harmonica or read a book. As a pair, they really contrast each other well. Today is an important day since we're set to finish our training to become part of the same Bracer Guild where Dad works. As we get ready to go on with our day, Dad asks us if we could pick up a copy of the newspaper on our way home. Sure thing, Pops. At the local guild house in the nearby city of Roland, we are greeted by the receptionist Aina and our mentor Sherazad. Shera will be the one conducting our final examination to become bracers. This exam is a tutorial for the game's mechanics combined with a quick rundown of the setting. Generally, the game is pretty good with more naturalistic storytelling, but for this part we are straight up just sat down to go through some basic exposition before we start the game. One reason for this is to properly communicate that there's a unique quirk with the setting of this game. The world of Trails in the Sky is like a stock JRPG fantasy one with monsters and magic and sword-wielding adventurers, but whereas many games exist in a sort of medieval stasis where no matter how much time progresses, society doesn't develop, Trails is not like that. This game is set in a time comparable to the Industrial Revolution, but instead of steam technology, this society runs on clockwork machinery called Orbments. 50 years prior, orbital technology was invented and has since made a massive impact on the development of this society. So right at the outset, this game is interesting since it asks what would happen to a typical fantasy setting if it was introduced to modernity. And one of these things is the Bracer Guild. Bracers are explained by Sherazad as investigative and combat specialists that maintain the stability of their respective regions. If that sounds kinda wonky, it's because bracers are meant to be a stand-in for the role a typical game protagonist performs, just adapted to a modern setting. In Trails in the Sky, being an adventurer is not a calling but a 9-to-5 job. And so there has to be an organization you can work at with co-workers, rules and regulations. It's the idea of an adventurers guild, but one where someone sat down and wrote its bylaws. We're also told about Liberl, the country we're in. It's a small kingdom ruled by a queen and rich in septum, the minerals necessary for producing orbments. Because of this, we're a technologically advanced nation, but also the target of large foreign powers. 10 years ago, Liberl was invaded by the Erebonian Empire, but the use of orbital-powered airships saved the kingdom from defeat. As a final note, we also learned that while magic is a real thing in this setting, any real application of it is made through the use of specialized orbments. So capital M magic is unusual, but casting a fireball is not, if that distinction makes sense. After these lectures, both Estelle and I are thankful that the final portion of our training will be of a more practical nature. So yeah, while I enjoy the prologue, this introduction kills all momentum in the first hour of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people tapped out right here, to be honest. But finally, with that out the way, we can take on the real test. We need to recover a package in the sewers under Roland. Killing rats in a sewer, now this feels like home. And yes, I know this doesn't look like a rat at all, but trust me, I checked. After battling through the sewers, we find the package and report our success to Shera and Aina. And with all that out of the way, we're presented with our bracer badges as Shera formally appoints us as junior bracers. With a serious tone, Shera asks us to work diligently so that we one day can become respectful bracers like our dad. And this is pretty sweet. Sherazade is one of the most skilled young bracers, even having earned the cool moniker of the Silver Streak. And she's being so modest that she defers to our doofus of a dad. Oh well, speaking of that, we should probably grab that newspaper we promised and bring him the good news. Crossing the street, we meet these two kids, Luke and Pat, and what an opportune moment to brag and flaunt our shit. Yeah, get 'em Estelle. Put those kids into their place. After grabbing the news edition of Liberl News, we run into a panicked Aina. After riling up those boys, they apparently went off into a ruined tower on the outskirts of Roland. But as the place has become a den for monsters, it's incredibly dangerous for two kids on their own. And shoot, Shera and the other bracers are out on business. Aha, but don't you worry about this. We are bracers now. Let us handle this. So let's get on with our first real job and do... Okay, I kinda forgot that the early game got hands. You're quite limited in your toolset and enemies hit like a truck. So as we gingerly make our way through the Molga trails, we come upon Esmila's tower. Still, no kids in sight. As we make our way up the tower, we see the boys getting set upon by monsters and rush in to save them. After defeating the monsters, we admonish the boys, but in a moment of carelessness, another monster seizes the opportunity to strike. And to the rescue is... Dad? Man, how embarrassing. It was our first real emergency, but we ended up getting bailed out by this stupid mustache. Seems like we still have much to learn. At home, after a packed day, we finally hand over the newspaper along with a letter we got from the guild. The letter is from Erebonia and contains some shocking news that we are not privy to. Trouble must be brewing. At dinner, Dad announces that he'll have to leave on a business trip for a while. He won't be able to finish the jobs that he's taking on, so he asks us if we can handle them in his stead. The next morning, we see him off at the landing port and get cracking on those jobs. This is also a great opportunity to explore the region and get to know the people here. And I gotta be honest, I rarely go around and talk with NPCs a lot in RPGs. I mean, I'll give it a try more out of obligation than because it's actually that interesting. But in Trails in the Sky, it's different, and it all starts here. When you first get to Roland, you're right in front of the local weapon shop, Elger's Arms and Guards. And since this is an RPG, you know we gotta check it out. Inside we meet the man himself. So usually in a lot of RPGs, going up to NPCs and clicking on them is not really speaking to them. It's more listen in on what they're thinking about. And Trails in the Sky does have these kinds of interactions, but a lot of them are actually small pieces of dialogue between our player characters and the NPC in question. So when you saunter up to Elger, he greets you and comments on what's going on in the story. He talks about Estelle and Joshua's upcoming exam and laments that Joshua will no longer be able to work part-time in the shop. since apparently he has a real knack for weapons, the little freak. After saying goodbye to Elgar, we check out what's upstairs and meet his wife Stella, who we in turn learn is something of a surrogate mother figure for Estelle. So this is cool. It's the first 2 NPCs I talked to, and I already learned interesting tidbits about our main characters. Elgar and Stella are inconsequential, not more than background NPCs. But these initial dialogues made such an impression on me that after we passed our exam, I immediately went back to Elgar to give him the news that we passed, and I'm rewarded with a small dialogue where we get to show Elgar our new credentials. Folks, to me this is what immersion is all about. I'm not just controlling an avatar in a video game, I'm inhabiting a real person who exists in this world. And Estelle and Joshua have a bunch of ties to the different inhabitants of Roland. There's Elisa, a local waitress and one of Estelle's childhood friends, Renan, the owner of the general store and purveyor of Estelle's prized sneakers, and let's not forget the local kids from before, the rambunctious Luke and his mild-mannered friend Pat. Oh, and one of my favorites is Claire, a precocious girl who wants to be a reporter and is already terrifyingly well-informed. These are just a few of the more prominent people in town, and the game has taught me that if I check up on them regularly, they will have interesting things to say as the game progresses. This habit of checking in on background characters is incentivized so well that I even got into talking with the just speaking their minds variant of NPCs. And the requests we get from the guild are great for this, since they involve going back and forth between a lot of different places. If you're already running around searching for a lost item, you might as well speak with the locals while you're at it. A lot of the main characters in the plot often hang around some place in the region, and you can go talk with them for small optional scenes. It's fun trying to find these, but they aren't important for the plot at all, so it's fine if you miss them. But hey, that left us a bunch of work, so let's get to it. Apparently a Purcell farm on the outskirts of Roland is having monster troubles, and we should give them a visit to deal with it. After handing over our referral from the guild, the troubled farmers tell us that the monsters plaguing the crops are nocturnal, so we'll probably have to spend the night. You might have noticed this by now. This game goes to great length to show the passage of time. The sun will rise and set as we trudge along doing brazier work, and a lot of scenes are about everyday practicalities of where we are staying for the night and what we're eating. As you move along the main story, time will pass and unfulfilled request will expire. How long you have varies, but you can generally estimate it based on its listing. Request marked with long you can take your time with. Medium ones you need to be aware of, and short means do this now or it'll expire. After dinner we chat a bit with Tio. She's another of Estelle's childhood friends and is gushing about how popular Joshua is with girls. Yet for some reason he has turned down every advance. This seems to genuinely shock Estelle. How dare this guy keep secrets from me? During the rounds we catch the critters in the act and chase them down. And look, we are fighting crop munchers in a cabbage field. How great is that? It's just a great visual backdrop for a low-level scenario. After beating the monsters, our pair have a rare moment of disagreement about whether or not to spare the subjugated monsters. And for once it's Joshua who's in the wrong. While Estelle is usually the immature one, here it's Joshua who fails to take the emotions of the client into account. After wrapping up this case of crops, we take a short trip to the Malcolm mines to pick up a large crystal that the mayor intends to gift the queen for her anniversary. As we hand it in, we meet Josette, a student from Jenny's Royal Academy who's visiting Roland during her summer vacation. Josette is obviously meant to be some sort of stand-in for a high school student, even if Janice is not explicitly referred to as such. And something the game doesn't put a lot of emphasis on is the fact that high school is basically the only form of higher education in this setting. Most children go to Sunday school, which is held by the Septian Church. Details are kinda vague, but it's roughly comparable to primary education, with children graduating around age 15. Estelle and Joshua have themselves only recently graduated before starting their brazier training. So while Sunday school is semi-obligatory, high school is not standard, with many going straight into the workforce after graduating from school. So when Josette gushes about how it's an honor to meet two braziers, it's humble of her. What a nice girl. After wrapping up business with the mayor, we meet up with the clients for the next job, the cynical reporter Niall Burns and his scatterbrained photographer Dorothy. They want to be escorted to the top of Ismela's towers and well, piece of cake. Been there already, no problem. When you run around, every member of your party is visible on the map, and this also extends to guest NPCs. Characters follow you in a row, so the more people you have along, the more vulnerable you are to monster attacks. So while our two young bracers can skirt around and avoid unnecessary combat when they're on their own, it's much harder to do so when you have a couple of civilians along with you. So this job requires us to carefully deal with the monsters in our path. That's a cool piece of diegetic storytelling right there. Another wrinkle with having NPCs along with you is that they don't just magically disappear when combat starts. Instead, they have their own initiative and health. If they take too much damage, then game over. While they can't attack, some can support you. Dorothy here can snap a picture and the blitz from her camera inflict monsters with blindness. Neat. So while this request might initially just seem like a normal dungeon crawl, having two civilians along changes the nature of the assignment. Getting to the top of the tower reveals an amazing view, and that this game wasn't made with widescreen in mind. While we take in the view, Joshua's sharp senses pick up on someone hiding here on the rooftop. Turns out it's just this guy, a traveling researcher called Professor Alba. As an archaeologist, he can shed some light on the history of this tower, and Niall sees an opportunity to get some juicy tidbits for his article. Alba tells you about the Septarions, ancient gifts from the goddess that were once handed to humanity in the distant past. The Septarions gave mankind power over the earth, seas and skies, but were allegedly lost during a mysterious calamity 1200 years ago. Around the same time this tower was built. Legend tells that one of these heavenly gifts dwell in Liberl, known under the name the Orole. And yo, Professor, cool story and all, but we can't use this for our article. We can't just print anything. Liberl News only prints verified facts. Joshua is getting woozy from the heights, so we rest a bit before returning to Roland. Chatting with Niall, he lets us in on the story of a string of high-profile burglaries in the neighboring region of Bose. Rumors suggest that the perpetrators are sky pirates, but our intrepid reporter suspects it might really be a clever ploy from the Erebonian Empire. Speaking of Erebonia, in a conversation with Professor Alba, Estelle reveals that while her mother died during the war 10 years ago, she doesn't harbor any ill will towards the people from Erebonia. Aww. Okay, I need to confess something. It was at this point I realized that Estelle is our main character. Okay, I know she's obviously a protagonist. I'm not that dumb. But up until now, I had kind of thought of her as part of a pair with Joshua. That they were both our main characters like Sarah and Noel or Mulder and Scully. But for the first time, we relinquish control over Joshua and Estelle becomes the sole point of view. At least from a mechanical perspective, she's like the main character. But I'd like to stand by my initial impression that Estelle and Joshua are a protagonist duo. Estelle might be the main point of view, but narratively I think they're equal. Oh well. Returning to Roland, we swing by the guild to report and oh hey, Sherry's back in town. And just before she hits the bars, emergency strikes as the mayor rushes in to tell us he's been robbed. Someone has taken the crystal we delivered. I love this scenario. This was when I became sold on the game. It's our first job with proper stakes and we get to investigate the crime scene and look around for clues. And to cap it off, we need to show that our training has paid off and that we are able to put together the circumstances of the crime. For just a small segment, this game turns into a mystery game, and I love it. Putting everything together, the clues point to the student Josette being the perpetrator. The guy at the landing port hasn't seen her, so she must still be in the region. And hey, didn't we find a peculiar leaf at the scene of the crime? One that only grows in the nearby forest of Mistwald? That sounds like a lead to me. Heading out, we bump into Niall and Dorothy. Apparently a major scoop is happening in Bose, but we don't have time for that right now. Now we have Shara along, and having an extra pair of hands really makes a difference, so we make short time through the forest. We find Josette and she's part of some group of outlaws. She was deceiving us this entire time. She was just pretending to be nice to me. This might be a good opportunity to talk about combat. Combat in Trails in the Sky is fairly straightforward. On the surface, it has all the bells and whistles of a turn-based JRPG. You can attack, use items, cast magic, and pull off devastating super attacks. But the game has a few wrinkles that sets it apart from other systems. The first thing you'll notice is that combat is set on a grid that enemies and allies move around on. Most attacks have a specific range or area of effect where they can hit combatants from. This means that movement and positioning actually matters a lot. If your party is bundled together, it's easier to buff and heal them, but they're also more vulnerable to AoEs. Initially you might think, oh, they're going for a strategy RPG thing, but it's really not. In something like Final Fantasy Tactics, you can move your characters around on each turn in addition to taking some other action, but here you only get one action per turn. If you take the move action, then that's it. That was your whole turn. Thankfully, most actions also include some free movement, but the catch is that you don't have control over your positioning. If you want to attack something that's outside your attack range, but inside the range of movement, your character will automatically move up to the enemy before they attack. This is usually not an issue, but it means that you can't do stuff like whack an enemy before running back to your healer. I like this constraint. It makes combat feel more brisk and it means you have to dedicate to actions. Attacking an enemy often means putting your character in a vulnerable spot. Especially early on, your characters aren't that tough and a couple of unlucky hits can quickly turn the tide in a fight. Depending on your position, it can even make sense for the more martially inclined characters to switch to a ranged magic attack simply to stay out of harm's reach for a turn. The importance of positioning does veer off after a while. Your options increase and your capacity for tanking and healing damage increases to a point where the combat comes to resemble a more traditional system. But it still injects fights with an extra element to consider. Another key feature is turn order. At any time you can see everyone's initiative on the left. When a character takes an action, they're moved down on the tracker. How far down they go is based on their speed and the kind of action they take, with different ones incurring less downtime than others. While spending your turn just moving might seem wasteful, it can be used to manipulate turn order since the turnaround is a lot shorter than a full action. And speaking of that, a fun feature of this system are these turn bonuses that you get if your character takes their turn on them. Most of these aren't big enough that they make or break fights. Mostly it's just healing a bit or boosting an attack, but if you're in a rough spot it can be crucial to prevent an enemy from getting a free critical hit or healing up. Next up is arts and crafts. Crafts are character-specific abilities, while orbital arts are universal for every character. Characters learn new crafts as they level up, while arts are accessible based on their loadout. A bit more on that later on. Crafts are really fun. As you fight, your characters earn craft points, or CP for short, based on stuff like dealing and taking damage. CP can then be used on special attacks and ability called, well, crafts. They vary based on characters and are generally used both for characterization and to differentiate characters mechanically. For example, Estelle is very socially outgoing and can buff her allies by pumping them up, and as a staff user she is good at crowd control. In comparison, Joshua uses dual swords and his first craft is a double attack, which makes him much more deadly against singular enemies. Unlocking new crafts throughout the game is exciting since it both expands your options in combat and teaches you more about the characters. Since you'll always be generating CP, you're not burdened with the incentive to ration it like other resources. Every player character is equipped with a tactical augment that allows them to use orbital arts. Arts function as the magic system in the game with a variety of spells you can cast in exchange for energy points, or EP for short. Arts have properties that make them fairly distinct from crafts. They can be extremely effective against enemies since they have unlimited range and can target elemental weaknesses. These strengths are then balanced around the fact that casting arts leaves you vulnerable for a while. The bigger the spell, the longer it takes to cast. This makes casting a spell feel deliberate since you have to commit to it. Certain enemies have the ability to interrupt your casting, making you waste the time unless you can defend your caster. But these factors also apply to enemies. Seeing an enemy gearing up to cast can be a real "oh shit" moment, making you scramble to either find a way to interrupt the cast or move out of the way. This in turn has the interesting consequence of making items much more useful. Since they don't require a cast time and only delay you a bit on the turn order, it's often more efficient to drop a quick item instead of relying on your caster being available. This doesn't come at the expense of the usefulness of arts, since their capacity for healing is much higher. It's a rare situation where magic and items are both useful but inhabit different niches. Lastly, every character also has an S-Craft, a powerful super move that you can only use if you have saved up at least 100 CP. And which consumes all your CP in one go. S-Crafts are filled with personality and are even more evocative of the characters. Seeing Estelle just go to town on someone is always a joy. Mechanically, they also have a really nifty property. If a character has the required CP, they can perform an S-Break at any time in the turn order to use their S-Craft out of turn. This is extremely useful. You can manipulate the turn order, finish off enemies near death, or simply get to make an attack in desperation before your character gets downed. After beating up the Sky Bandits, we reclaim the crystal, but just as we're about to make the arrest, an airship shows up and rescues them. Back at the guild, Sheriff thanks us for the help and we're giving a formal recommendation from the Roland branch of the Bracer Guild. Since we're currently only junior bracers, we have to be registered with a local branch. If we want to work wherever we want, we'll need to become senior bracers, and that requires that we get a recommendation from every guild branch in the country. Phew, that sounds like a tall order to me. Just as we're considering our future prospects, the phone rings. The airship Linde has disappeared in the Bose region, and more importantly, our father Cassius was on board when it went missing. After a bit of deliberation, we decide to set off for Bose to investigate the case of the missing airliner, and hopefully find Dad in the process. Shara is fine with it, as long as she can come along and keep an eye on us. Since the airliners are out of service, we have to get to Bose on foot, but that should be no trouble for bracers. When we arrive, we check in with the local guild branch and get our papers in order so we can take jobs in Bose. Afterwards, we meet up with the local mayor, Mabel, who formally hires us to track down the missing airliner. She's pretty cool. On one hand, she's hardworking and competent, but she also has a more cheeky and impulsive side to her. I like her. Lately, the region has been beset by Sky Bandits, outlaws who use orbital airships to steal, plunder and kidnap. Sounds familiar? The Linde was almost certainly hijacked by them. Fittingly for a chapter about search and rescue, the region of Bose feels a lot more spacious compared to Roland. But it's also less thematically coherent. Roland was great at presenting itself as a rural region just by its secondary locations. A farm, a mine, and a big forest. All primary industries. The key characteristic of Bose is commerce, but the surrounding areas are more of an eclectic mix. A remote village, a border garrison, a lakeside resort, and a treacherous mountain area. The city itself is also my least favorite, its most prominent feature being a central market. It just doesn't work as a landmark you can navigate after, leaving me to become lost embarrassingly often. Compared to the jobs we've been doing so far, this is a pretty major case. Despite our inexperience, there's multiple times where Estelle gets too impressed that there's more to her than an energetic girl with a big stick. The investigation is complicated by the Royal Army, who are also set on solving the case, but are impeding us at every step of the way. The army is led by General Morgan, who's infamous for his hatred against bracers, so to say that the army is being helpful is somewhat of an understatement. With some hustling, we do get a lead on the Sky Bandits and manage to track down the Linde on the outskirts of a small village called Ravenue. And just as we're about to make the arrest, they skedaddle out of there. As we confirm that the missing passengers aren't here, the army sweeps in and begins to throw their weight around. The general accuses us of being in thick with the bandits and promptly arrests us. This chapter is really preoccupied with jurisdictional squabbles. Since the abduction of a commercial airliner is a matter of national security, the Royal Army is formally expected to take action in restoring order. But it turns out they've accomplished a whole lot of nothing. Which is why the mayor has hired us. So I guess we're basically private investigators? Well, not really. In Liberl, the Bracer Guild is apparently sanctioned to handle certain matters regarding crimes and civilian safety. When you're trying to apprehend the Sky Bandits, Shera has this stock phrase she says. In accordance with the laws of the Bracer Guild, you are under arrest, and so on. I always read this as a reference to an internal code of conduct or something for Bracers. We seem to be a self-governed organization, but looking at it now again, it seems pretty obvious to me that no, she's referring to the fact that Liberl has basically delegated part of its peacekeeping to an external organization. Which is kinda wild when you think about it. Depending on how you look at it, we're either a volunteer police corps or a hired security detail. With that in mind, I kinda get why General Morgan is being prissy about us. This case is more than just finding the airliner. It's also a test of who's more capable of keeping peace and order. The army, us Bracers, or perhaps a secret third thing. But yeah, basically we're in a dick measuring contest with the big army men and losing. Thankfully, arresting us is outside the general's mandate, so we're released on order of Mayor Maybell the next day. And don't worry, we're in good company this chapter. We've brought Shera along as our third party member, but we are also joined by the eccentric traveler Olivier. Olivier is a self-proclaimed bard in a time where that's not really a thing. And despite hailing from Erebonia, a culture known for their macho men, he's more of a dandy with a knack for getting himself into trouble. We promised the mayor to let him assist in the investigation, partly to keep him out of trouble. Luckily for us, he's an accomplished marksman underneath his goofy mannerism, so he's actually a big help. When we go to Revenue, we also bump into another senior bracer called Agate, who's known as the Heavy Blade. But he's both dismissive of us as junior bracers and he's busy with some other job. At this point, you've probably gotten used to only having two characters, and it's hard to undersell just how much of a difference it makes to have a full party along. Shera comes equipped with powerful arts, and Olivier can attack from range. Oh hey, Niles here as well. Tracking a lead, we mosey down to Valeria Lake where the bandits have been spotted. While waiting for nightfall, Estelle finds Joshua at a quiet spot alone. Despite his best attempts, he can't hide being troubled. He's clearly struggling with something from his past and simultaneously feels guilty for not being able to share it with Estelle. Yet she reassures him. She promised him a long time ago that she would not inquire about his past. Despite being a goofball, someone who gets info from a child witness by impressing him with her sick staff tricks, Estelle is the emotionally mature one of the pair. She knows when not to pry and to let Joshua know that she's there to listen when he's ready to talk. Imagine that, emotionally well-adjusted JRPG protagonists. What a novelty. Alright, it's time for our stakeout, and we learn that the Sky Bandits are apparently colluding with some mysterious figures clad in black combat gear. We sneakily hitch a ride on the Sky Bandits airship to their hideout and bust their entire gang. After freeing the hostages, we confront the three siblings who lead the gang, Josette, Kyle and Don Capua. And man, I love the Capua family. They're such good early tier antagonists. They're this game's very own Team Rocket, if Team Rocket themselves were also a Pokemon evolution line. I love fighting them and being all,
gun? Okay, bomb? Shoot a bomb gun?
Noticeably, the younger siblings are put off by their older brother's behavior. He's apparently acting atypically ruthless, and after defeating them, he does seem to be confused about what he was doing. With a final desperate move, they attempt to flee, and just as we're about to arrest them, we are beaten to the punch by the Royal Army led by Colonel Alan Richard. The Colonel is the commander of the newly established intelligence division, and it was seemingly due to their work that the army was able to track down the Sky Bandits. We actually met him earlier in Bose, and he seems genuinely willing to work with us and even apologized for the army's general attitude against us. Man, what a guy. And this conclusion seems to answer the central question of the chapter. The old army was ultimately powerless if not for the interference of the newly founded intelligence division. They weren't even able to prevent information about the case from leaking out to the public. And despite getting the drop on the bandits, we weren't able to follow through in the end either. It's only due to this new direction that Alan Richard represents that this crisis was settled. I like that we do get to be successful, but not quite. Our achievement is stolen out from under us at the last moment in a believable way. Back in the city, we're thanked by the mayor, and the guild rewards us with another recommendation. And this is nice and all, but we went through all this trouble to save Dad, and he wasn't part of the hostages, so where could he be? And just as we ponder that, a message is delivered to us from Cassius himself. He never boarded the airliner as the job he was working on turned out to be more trouble than expected. He tells us that we shouldn't expect to see him for a good while and that we are free to pursue our qualifications to become senior bracers in the meanwhile. With the message, there's also a parcel containing a black orbment alongside a mysterious memo mentioning a Professor R signed by K. Everyone is stumped at what this could be, but Joshua has a suggestion. What if we continue the journey to the other regions? We just need recommendations from Ruan, Zeiss and Gransel, and along the way we can look for clues about Dad and this mysterious orbment. So we say goodbye to Shara and Olivier, who travels back to Roland together. And before we move on to chapter 2, we get some bombshell revelations. On their ride back to Roland, we're treated with a scene of Shara confronting Olivier. His whole debonair shtick is an obvious front. In reality, he's not a traveling bard, but some sort of Erebonian operative that is way better connected than he appears. He admits that his true intention in coming to Laberl was to meet a certain someone, a supreme swordsman and master strategist of the Royal Army. The bracer with a rank held only by 4 other people, the divine blade Cassius Bright. Wait, Dad? This guy? But he uses a staff and he never mentioned being a military man. What's going on? I love how these reveals about Cassius are handled. The game hasn't exactly been subtle about there being more to this guy, but it's been so gradual that you can be excused for being in the same headspace as Estelle, where you think all these people are just being polite when they glaze him. Up until now, the plot has been a slow burn. Plenty of stuff happens, but it's kinda hard to see where it's all going. But now the game really opens up. We have a clear goal, becoming senior bracers, and a larger mystery. What happened to Dad and what's the deal with the Black Orbment and those shadowy operatives. For me, this hits a sweet spot. I have a clear personal motivation that drives my moment-to-moment actions and a more overarching mystery that gradually unfolds. And this scene in particular shows me that there's more to this setting than we've seen so far. There are big, important actors at play here above what we can see from our viewpoint. And so the scene is set for our adventure to begin for real. Our next stop is the seaside region of Ruan. Following Shara's advice, we decide to travel around the country on foot instead of using the convenient airship routes that connect all major cities. To protect the country is to know the country, and there's no better way to do that than by seeing it up close and personal. Trekking through the Crony Pass, we meet Agate again, and get attacked by weird monsters in the night. What a coincidence! Finally, we're in the Ruan region proper, and what a view. We make a brief stop in the local Magnolia village for a quick little lunch break. introduced to matron Teresa, who runs the orphanage. The girl with the falcon is Chloe, a local student who helps out at the orphanage. The bird is a gyrfalcon called Zeke, and it's not her pet but some kind of companion. After drinking our tea, Chloe offers to show us the way to Ruin. She'll act as a local guide for the region and will be the main companion for this portion of the game. This chapter reveals something that might not have been obvious till now. Trails in the Sky breaks with a standard JRPG format. When you left Roland, you couldn't return to it from Bose, and you might have written that off as a regular case of JRPG starting town shenanigans, but no. You can't go back to previous areas after you've left and clean up unfinished requests and such. Time and space matter in a way it rarely does in RPGs. In a similar vein, your player characters are not unlocked in a linear fashion once and then available for the rest of the game. No, the companions in Trails in the Sky have their own agency and come and go at appropriate moments. Olivier again for a long time, but instead we now have Chloe along. And this is all so cool. A core appeal of RPGs is the sense of progression, and in this game you get that on a tiny scale in every chapter. You always start with just Estelle and Joshua and then slowly build up to a full party. You get to explore and master your surroundings before permanently moving on to a new one. This also keeps the immediate scope of the game manageable. Even if I liked keeping in touch with old Elgar back in Roland, it would be tiresome if the game expected me to backtrack to Roland every time something happened in the plot. You meet NPCs just long enough that you get to know them before moving on. Each companion character also gets a lot of room to breathe since they are not vying for attention from a full party. They have ample opportunities to chime in during conversations and all get their moments to shine in the story. Shifting around who tags along our main pair allows the game to shake up their relationship by comparing and contrasting them with different people. For example, Chloe is much more of a peer to Estelle and Joshua, whereas Shara was a co-worker and a mentor figure. Because of this, the party dynamic is constantly kept fresh from chapter to chapter. Ruin is such a great location for an RPG. The coastline beautifully frames the region and gives a great sense of direction. I rarely lost my way even with the minimap turned off. When we reach the city, Chloe shows us to the guild house, but as the receptionist is busy, we can sightsee a bit before we check in. I've heard some people describe the charm of this game as akin to virtual tourism, and if there's one place that really evokes this, it's Ruin. God damn it if I don't adore this place. The white buildings along the canals and a mixture of bridges, underpasses and staircases. It just feels good to run around the space. The city is also really easy to navigate, with the main street and the harbor being two very distinct districts divided by a river. It just has good summer vibes, very vacation-y. In general, I adore how the game looks. The pre-rendered character sprites, low poly models along with an isometric viewpoint really gives the environment the impression of small dioramas. And let me tell you, the vibes are immaculate. I especially love all the interiors, they're so cute. Look at the tiny shelves, the fish on the walls, the goddamn stoves, and let's not forget the crummy looking wine glasses every time the adults get the drink on. General Morgan even has a wine rack in his office. Seems like he sleeps here and, well, I don't know, might as well at that point, I guess. The character portraits also go a long way to sell the characters and the dialogue in the game. Estelle especially is very expressive. I mean, look at this smug face. Another highlight is the cutscenes, which are surprisingly well animated and choreographed, considering how limited they must have been with using pre-rendered sprites. It's very dramatic and sells the scenes whenever they're used. As we are shown around town, we are introduced to the main conflict of the region. As we visit the harbor district, we are beset by a gang of dissatisfied youths who calls themselves the Ravens. More than any other city in the country, Ruin has felt the impact of the Orbital Revolution. It used to rely on its fishing industry and served as a major hub for seaside shipping. But with the introduction of airships making seaports redundant, the city has shifted to tourism and service industries. I don't think it's outright stated anywhere, but the Ravens feel like a byproduct of this economic transition. They're unemployed and have no proper place in the new city, so they get drunk and harass visitors to the exasperation of the local government. Mayor Dolmore here seems nice, but he's also presented as much more upper class than the previous mayors we've met. Speaking of upper class, we're also introduced to the Queen's nephew and next in line for the throne, Duke Doonan. He's a hilarious mix of corrupt and incompetent, so far removed from the reality of regular citizens that he doesn't even register that he's a pain in the ass for everyone around him. The plot of the chapter kicks off when the orphanage burns down in the middle of the night. A quick investigation reveals that it was definitely not an accident. People are quick to blame the Ravens, but before things can get out of hand, Agate shows up again. The entire matter might be relevant to his current assignment, so he'll be taking over the investigation. This means that we're taken off the case. He reasons that we're still rookies and that we're too personally invested in the orphanage to keep emotions out of the case. And to be honest, I kinda am. Look, usually when a game clearly tries to communicate that I should care about something, it has the exact opposite effect on me. But I got blindsided by the orphanage. It's just a cozy little place, and you can kinda tell that they're not exactly well off. So seeing it all go up in flames seems so excessively cruel, and I really want to bust the balls of whoever did this. Incidentally, the receptionist Jean lets it slip that Agate used to be part of the Ravens, but apparently that doesn't make him biased. Oh well, he's our senior, so we gotta defer. Can't wait to be a senior bracer so I don't have to deal with this bullshit. Being of the arson case, we are suddenly free to help out with the regular workload of the branch, and we are roped into assisting Chloe with the preparation of the annual school festival at Jenny's Royal Academy. I remember on my first time around, Chapter 2 kinda annoyed me. You come off from Chapter 1 riding high. You dealt with the Sky Bandits, proved you got what it takes to handle big jobs, and the story has put forward its central mysteries. But then the main crux of this chapter can feel kinda meandering. As soon as the primary conflict kicks into gear, everything suddenly grinds to a halt. It's a complete whiplash. When I picked up this game, I wasn't looking for another high school story, and this sudden interlude where you mock about a school festival seemed really forced. But revisiting it, I think this might be the best chapter. There are so many neat character moments, the local cast is great, it sets up a lot of cool plot threads for later chapters and so on. And to be honest, now I kinda like that Agate pulls rank on us. We're not the center of the universe, there are people more qualified to solve this than us, so instead we're put on something more relevant for rookie bracers. Oh, and as a quick side note, I just realized this, but Agate named his little gang after his hometown. Man, that's so dorky. Something this game does exceptionally well is frame what you're doing in the context of being a bracer. From the beginning, you are presented with an overall goal of achieving senior rank, and you are graded on your performance on the job. So side quests are not just random events you stumble upon, but concrete requests that you take on because that is your actual job. For each request you complete, you are awarded bracer points or BP. And if you do an exceptional job, you get bonus points. You start at rank 9, and when you rack up enough points, you are promoted to the next rank. It never feels weird or unfitting that you take on odd jobs, even if you have something more important to do. When you speak with other bracers, they often mention their workload and thank you for taking jobs off their back. So you could ignore a request. They are completely optional, and some other bracer might come around and pick it up for you. But I would feel kind of bad just deliberatively leaving work to my colleagues like that. Requests often present small dilemmas, forcing you to decide on how to approach the situation at hand. These vary quite a bit and tie into the things Estelle needs to work on if she's going to become a full bracer. Don't act brashly without thinking, don't hesitate when lives are on the line, and for God's sake, pay attention when the client explains the job to you. Jobs are also your main source of income, so completing them is the best way to afford new equipment. And finally, they also teach you about the local region and the people in it. As Cher tells you, you need to walk and actually see the places we protect with your own eyes. I admit this tiny line made me feel obligated to learn about the regions I'm in. The people who live there, the local culture and history, and how to navigate the area. And if you're going to run around, you might as well solve some requests while you're at it. Requests themselves don't lack variety either, from helping train the local army recruits to finding lost items. Sometimes you need to exterminate some monsters, other times you need to negotiate with troublesome guests in a restaurant. You're never overwhelmed by them, most are fairly brief affairs, but they're great at making you engage with the world. Like in Chapter 1, you're asked to track down a rare flower that only grows in humid areas. There are no quest markers, so you have to think about where that could be and actually track it down. Maybe around Lake Valeria? Nah, there's plenty of water, but it's not exactly humid. Wait, the area around Nebel Valley is filled with fog, so maybe there? Bingo. That sort of thing really reinforces the experience that you're learning about the local areas and their characteristics. The game does a lot to ground you in the world. Like, every time you go to a new region, you have to register with the local guild. And there's something tactile about having to go check an actual board to see the available requests, and following this, you're also required to manually report back to the guild when you've completed a request. Doing these small but rote administrative tasks adds to the verisimilitude of Bracer being an actual job and not just a fancy title. The request board updates semi-regularly, so you'll need to check in from time to time to see if there's any new requests. And beyond that, there are also some requests that you can't find on the board at all. The only way to get those is to find them out in the world on your own. And this might be a controversial take, but I really like how Trails in the Sky handles hidden quests. There aren't a lot of them, and they always make sense in some way or the other. The first one you can find is back in Roland, just before you go to Bose. Since I was leaving town, I naturally went around to say goodbye to the locals, which seems like the natural thing to do. And when I checked in with Father Divine here, what a name, he basically said, "Hey, if you're going to Bose, do you mind taking this letter along with you to the local priest there?" And that's it really. You give the letter to Father Holstein and that's the job done. Do you really miss out on anything by not running this errand? Not really, it's a nice little nod you get for saying goodbye to this priest and you learn a bit more about the church, but it's extremely optional. It's a quest that only works because it's optional, otherwise it would just be a meaningless delivery quest or something. I often see people complain about the amount of missable content. Since chapters are separated both temporally and locationally, it means that most things in the game are limited to a very specific window of opportunity. If you don't buy the current issue of the newspaper, it'll simply be lost forever by the time you've moved on. And I know it can be stressful to miss out on content in a narrative-heavy game like this. Most people will probably only play it that one time and want to get the most out of it, so I often hear people recommend playing the game with a guide. And look, I know it can be hard to shake the FOMO mindset, but this is a surefire way to kill the experience. I'd say that the main joy of this game are these tiny moments of validation where the game recognizes that you went out of your way to do something. If you're just following a guide, you lose out on that sense of exploration and surprise. Like, you can collect a series of books in this game, and yeah, they're highly missable, but they're books, man. Who gives a shit? Look, to each their own. All I'm saying is that if you play this game with a guide, you're not invited to my birthday party. Getting back to Ruin, it also has my favorite character in this game. When you're initially traveling to the city, you can come across an old lighthouse on your way. If you check it out, you meet Vogt, the keeper of the lighthouse. He's kinda an eccentric old coot, but he's having trouble with monsters. You can help him by clearing out the lighthouse, and he'll recount a story about a young bracer with the same hair and eyes as Estelle. He'll rant about how well this bracer treated him and was hoping you'd give him the same level of service. A real okay boomer moment. Later on, when we're doing jobs for the guild, we are requested by the local Orbal factory to bring some maintenance tools to the old keeper. If you already met the old man, you can comment on it and the client will tell you how he's worried about his well-being. Before becoming a lighthouse keeper, he was a fisherman and used to come around at the local bar a lot. Tending the lighthouse is lonely work though, and he rarely gets the opportunity to come around and get a drink anymore. So, you know what? Let's bring him one. It's not part of the job, but you know, what the hell. We make a short stop at the bar he used to frequent, and the bartender remembers the guy. He's also worried that the old man gets lonely, so he offers to make his favorite drink. Nice. He comments that it would go excellent with a salted snack, but he doesn't have any on hand. Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. While we're at it, let's see if we can scrunch something up. A quick visit to a local shop, and hey, they're selling salted anchovies. Great. So we haul the maintenance supplies to the old keeper and also present him with the drink, the snacks, and the greetings from all the people who miss him and care about his well-being. And you can tell how he's taken aback by this. Not from the gift, but the unprompted compassion from a stranger. I love this quest, because it gives you the opportunity to be nice to someone. It's not expected of you, and you don't need to do it. It's just a thoughtful gesture you can do. I rarely get attached to characters. Maybe it's my cynical soul, but I have trouble seeing past the fact that these are fictional people written by someone for something. But this guy, I care about him. I see him there alone at night, in that lighthouse. And like the people of Ruin, I worry that it gets lonely for him. I worry about him going up all those stairs at his age, and by proxy I also care about the bartender and the factory owner in town, because like me, they care about this guy. Helping out with the school festival is actually not that bad. In general, set pieces in this game are fairly short, so they don't outstay their welcome. Both Estelle and Joshua are roped into participating in the school play, where every role is said to be played by someone of the opposite gender. And let me just load this thing. Being around a lot of peers makes Estelle suddenly aware of her unusual relationship with Joshua. They're technically adopted siblings, but they act more like friends and partners. They've known each other for a long time, but they didn't grow up together. People assume they're a couple, and while she denies it, Estelle now can't help but have this framing in mind when she interacts with Joshua. She gets flustered at moments of intimacy with him, and is also clearly, consciously or not, wanting more from him than his aloof attitude delivers. And this all culminates with the school play, where she realizes that she's uncomfortable with the idea of Joshua kissing another girl. You might be thinking, what the fuck is going on with the story of this game? What happened to the adventure? But look, I'm so jacked up by the action choreography of this school play to care about that. Like, look at them go! Anyways, the plot of the play is about Liberal's history, but with a fairy tale twist of the goddess intervening with a miracle to save the day. A real old school Deus Ex Machina. It hasn't been a big focus so far, but people in this setting worship a monotheistic deity called Adius. The Septian churches that have been present in every city so far are dedicated to this sky goddess. And like the Bracer Guild, they perform a multitude of public services for their local communities. The miracle in this play is probably a reference to how instrumental they were in rebuilding society after the Great Collapse that we were told about by the professor back in the prologue. As the play comes to a close, we see an ashen-haired man exit the gymnasium, and we're presented with a small real-life miracle of our own. Alongside the festival, the school has been organizing a charity fundraiser and have decided on the orphanage as this year's recipient. This money would allow the matron to rebuild the orphanage and keep the orphans in her care. And just when everything seems to be working out, disaster strikes again, when the money is stolen by unknown assailants. Agate shows up hot on the heels of the perpetrators, and with the help of him and Chloe, we track them down to the lighthouse. Inside we find the Ravens, but they're acting in some kind of haze, obviously not aware of their own actions. Finally, we have a full party again, so let's talk a bit about Chloe and Agate. I really like how Chloe is represented. She feels more like a tag-along civilian than a trained fighter. And when you meet her initially, she even acts like one of the NPCs you escort. And it isn't until she pulls out her sword against the Ravens that she's revealed to be a companion. She's vulnerable, her normal attacks are weak, and her main craft is actually just Zeke assisting her. She's pretty nifty at arts though, and I guess I always interpreted this as being a reflection of her higher education. Fittingly, her S-craft is also the only healing-based one in the game, so she nicely fills a more support-oriented role. She feels weak, but her support-oriented crafts and her aptitude for arts actually makes her extremely useful. Agate is kind of the opposite. He's a powerhouse character, or he's supposed to, I think, but he doesn't really feel like that. He has a strong AoE craft, but the small area makes it fiddly to use. His greatest asset is the craft Wild Rage that sacrifices his health to generate CP, allowing him to use his powerful S-craft way more often than other characters. Fittingly, this makes him feel like a reckless character, someone who is powerful but constantly at the risk of self-destructing. Getting to the top of the lighthouse, we see those black-clad operatives again, alongside the mayor's aide. Gilbert here lays out the plot. The mayor was behind the arson and intends to transform the area around the orphanage into ritzy, upscale vacation homes. And yeah, I agree, real estate truly is the biggest crime of them all. Am I right, fellas? But more importantly, these fuckers better not have heard my man vote. Before we can make the arrest though, the men in black take Gilbert hostage and they fucking cap him in the knee. I'd kind of forgotten how brutal that is in this cutesy anime game about traveling around the world. So they make their escape and Agate sets out to pursue them as he leaves the arrest of the mayor himself to us. We confront the corrupt mayor who reveals to have 2 pet monsters hidden away. And when he's cornered he pulls out an artifact, an ancient technological relic outlawed by the church. This thing completely freezes us in place, and as if the goddess herself has blessed us with another miracle, our mystery orbment lights up and we are released from the grasp of the artifact. Then just to cap everything off, we have a high-speed boat chase where Estelle fucking deflects bullets before we're again shown up by the Royal Army. This time though, it's the Royal Guard, who have flown in on their new high-speed cruiser, the Assail. What auspicious timing of them. One thing I'm not really a fan of is that it's implied that Mayor Dalmor was also under the influence of some external force, as he claims to not have any memory of his actions. And man, that's just toothless. We already saw the Ravens get mind controlled like Don Capua, and the Black Men were involved in both incidents, so we know that there is something that connects these two cases. So why couldn't this just have been a case of a shitty noble who's trying to get his grubby hand on more wealth and power? Well, despite that minor gripe, I really enjoyed the themes of this chapter. There's a lot of emphasis put on the idea of generations, the differences between the young and the old. The older inhabitants wistfully reminisces about the past, while the current youth are angry at the present. At its best, the different generations have a mutual responsibility for each other, exemplified by the collective actions to care for the lighthouse keeper and the orphanage. On the other side, we also see the old screw over the young, with the antagonist using his inherited wealth and power to uproot the orphans and try to scapegoat the Ravens. There's even a small nod to how we ourselves are following in the footprints of our father. The school section also makes a lot more sense with this in mind. School is a fixture that binds generations together, and at the festival we see familiar faces return as alumni. The play itself also deals with the past and how it shaped the current country. It's all very nice and coherent. And while it's not exactly in the foreground, I appreciate the inclusion of class conflict with the rich mayor set in opposition to the marginalized inhabitants of Ruin. As with the previous chapter, this one ends with some more teasing about our companions. Chloe is clearly more than an ordinary schoolgirl and apparently has close ties to the Royal Guard, while Agate has a cool duel against the masked commander that hints at his own troubled past. Getting back on track, we really need to find out what the deal is with this mystery orbment. Luckily, stopping the mayor earned us a recommendation for Ruan, and the next stop on our journey is Sais. Sais is known as the seat of orbal technology in the country, with its central factory looming over the region both physically and socially. We say goodbye to Chloe and promise to meet up with her in Gransel. She'll be visiting the capital in time for the celebration of the Queen's birthday, and that should coincide with when we'll be visiting. As with the previous one, Chapter 3 starts with some excellent framing. You travel through an underground passage, meet with Tita, an apprentice engineer, and ascend to Sais through the bowels of the central factory. It's a very thematically fitting introduction for a region known for its industry. The note to Dad said to bring the Black Orbment to a Professor R, which must refer to Professor Russell, the engineer who pioneered orbital technology in Liberl. And he just so happens to be Tita's grandfather of all things. He's just as stumped about what it could be, and when he runs a test on it, a peculiar thing happens. The Black Orbment activates and every orbment in the city shuts down before the professor cancels the test. The professor dubs this the orbital shutdown phenomenon and is determined to figure out the secrets of the Black Orbment. While he's busy with that, we can do some jobs he's left to Tita, who will be our main companion in Sais. Chapter 3 has a more introspective feel to it than the previous ones. It mostly revolves around the central factory itself and the people there. There is a lot fewer locations outside the city compared to other regions, with Sais itself having a fairly simple layout. And not that there aren't interesting things to find. The big escalator on the main street is pretty evocative of the vibe of the city, and the central factory has labs, libraries, and weird tomatoes. Oh, and they also have a whole ass computer in their attic. I love how it fills up the entire room and that its only discernible interface is this wonky panel. It's pretty cute. When you're introduced to the Capelle, you're asked if you understand the explanation on how it works, and if you answer yes, then Estelle casually admits to lying even if you, the player, understood it. It's a fun little meta joke that really sells how alien this thing is to the people in the setting. Out on the job we meet Jin, a traveler from Calvert who practices an Eastern martial art. Calvert is a large neighboring republic to the east, rivaling Erebonia in size and power. As with Calvert, Sais is also home to Eastern Touches. This hot spring resort is a big one, but there's also Kilika, the local guild receptionist. Speaking of hot springs, when we visit, Tita takes the opportunity to ask Estelle what the deal is with her and Joshua. And at this point in the story, she becomes properly rattled by the implication of the question. I appreciate how they've towed the line with these scenes. They're spread around every chapter and there's no singular pivotal moment for Estelle. There is no one scene where she suddenly goes all
I love Josh.
Every scene advances their budding romance, but in a very natural way. There's no meet cute, no contrived circumstances that lead them together. No, they already know each other, like each other platonically, but as they develop and mature, their relationship subtly pivots into something else. I find it very believable and charming. When we return to check in on the professor, the central factory has been attacked and he's being forcefully taken away by the Men in Black along with the Black Orbment. Agate is hot on the heels, and with a tip from our friendly neighborhood archaeologist, we figure out that they've taken the professor to the nearby Carnelia Tower. As this is obviously too dangerous for a kid, we leave Tita and rush after them with Agate. At the tower, we're again beset by the same monsters that have haunted us a lot recently. Just as we're about to put the screws to these guys, Tita shows up and she's not here to negotiate. Just as she's about to get shot, Agate moves in quickly to catch a bullet for her. Well, this was a bust, and to make matters worse, Agate collapses on the trip home. The bullet he took was apparently laced with an experimental nerve toxin. Man, these guys really said fuck them kids, I guess. So well, now Agate's dying. Thankfully the local priest can make a cure, but he needs ingredients located in a dangerous cavern. Normally he would send an entire team of veteran bracers to harvest the moss. No trouble though, since this bear of a bracer is happy to lend us a hand. Oh yeah, Jin turns out to be a bracer as well. He's on his way to Gransel and just stopped by to visit Kilika. He has to leave tomorrow, but he's happy to help us out before that. Tita and Jin are the final companion characters we'll meet, and they'll continue the trend of expressing character through gameplay. As with Chloe, Tita serves as a guide for the region, and she's even more of a tag-along. She's slow, weak, and has like half the amount of hit points as other characters. And I really appreciate this. Like, she's a child with little to no combat experience. It feels appropriate that you have to plan around her. What evens the playing field is that she wields a powerful orbital cannon. And this thing is powerful. She's the only character whose normal attacks deal area damage, and her main craft is a huge area attack that you can angle as you wish. In the right kind of setup, she can sweep the battlefield, but she struggles to be useful against bosses. Jin is the opposite. First of all, he's a huge sack of hit points, but secondly, he feels like a character that's meant to be totally independent of others. He can heal and buff himself and feels almost impossible to kill. He sucks at using arts, but he's great as a frontline fighter that keeps enemies occupied while the back row charges up their attacks. I think every companion in this game is decently balanced mechanically, but at this specific point, Jin really sells himself as a powerful character. And I really appreciate how his sprite is uniquely large. You see him and immediately clock him as a brick wall. Speaking of combat, so far there's not been a lot of room for character builds and the like, but at this point the system has begun to open itself up to the point where you can tinker a bit with it. Every player character has a tactical orbment with a set amount of slots that can be fitted with gemstones made of septum called quartz. Each quartz strengthens a specific attribute but also decreases an opposing attribute. The orbment system is an interesting concept. It's not just choosing straight upgrades, since each quartz puts a character in a certain direction. If you boost your attack power, you will inherently make the character more vulnerable and vice versa. I also like that the method for character development has a diegetic explanation, but to be honest, it's never really relevant for the plot. Oh well. A main part of this system is flexibility. A character's build is never set in stone, since you can always reconfigure your orbments. For example, in Chapter 2, where you had Chloe around, it makes sense to focus Estelle and Joshua on physical attacks, since she is much better suited for arts. On the other hand, since both Tita and Jin can't do arts if their life depended on it, it makes sense to pivot our main duo over to magic. The game is pretty limited, but I think that's intentional. Estelle and Joshua feel like weak characters, and it's only toward the back half of the game that you begin to feel confident in them as RPG protagonists. And that roughly coincides with when they come into their own as bracers. This dedication to gameplay and mechanics primarily being a way to underscore the narrative is something that I adore about this game. I enjoy how unapologetically this game puts its world and narrative first. With Agate healed, we send Jin off to the capital and we get back to investigating the kidnapping. Following a tip from our reporter friend, we can deduce that the professor is very likely being kept in the nearby military installation, Leiston Fortress. So wait a minute, aren't we fucked? As bracers, aren't we not meant to interfere in government affairs? We are deputized to handle peacekeeping, sure, but we can't interfere with military or political matters. Ah, but don't worry. Kilika offers the most comical loophole imaginable. Part of our internal code is to always protect civilians, and since the professor is a civilian, we're technically somehow allowed to bust him out of military confinement. This is honestly my biggest single gripe with the plot and world building of this game. For reasons revealed later on, this won't have repercussions, but it's almost farcical that an organization like the Guild would jeopardize its international reputation as a neutral actor for something this relatively minor. If we get caught breaking out political prisoners, that would be ample ground to kick the Bracer Guild out of the country for good. It's a very aggressive move, and I can only guess that the guild must feel like it has enough leverage with the royal government to strong-arm it if push comes to shove. But even so, it feels like a bigger decision than something a receptionist at a local branch should be allowed to authorize. The receptionists do seem like they're the leading directors of the guild, and the Gransel branch seems to coordinate national matters across regions. But Kilika seemingly decides this on her own, so who knows really. And normally I would write these things off as narrative convenience, but we've explicitly spent a whole chapter where the central crux of the plot was the competing jurisdiction between the guild and the army. The issue is not that the guild skirts the line with these legalities, that's actually a really interesting indictment against it. No, my issue is that the plot is entirely uncritical of these methods. Kilika does make sure we're operating on the request of Factory Chief Murdoch, so I guess we have some plausible deniability that we are acting on behalf of the governing body in size. But that only really raises the question of how much autonomy the regions have in Liberl. The mayor in Roland and Bose are explicitly elected, while the post in Ruin was hereditary before the arrest of Dalmor. It's unclear how Murdoch got his post though. The Central Factory doesn't act like a private corporation, and there's no mention of an owner besides being founded by Professor Russell, but he seemed more like a star employee than an owner. The ZCF acts like the governing body of SAIS and seems to be at least partially funded by the royal government, so maybe the chief is appointed by the Queen? But according to the information in Capelle, the Central Factory originated as the SAIS Clockmakers Union, so I guess it might actually be run as a corporation of some sort, with the chief being elected among its workers? Alright, fuck it, we're running with that interpretation. So we're going up against Her Majesty's Royal Army on behalf of the workers of SAIS. Comrades, rise up. The rescue operation itself is a highlight set piece in the game. We stow away on board the ZCF's maintenance ship and stealthily make our way to where the professor is kept. We listen in on a conversation with his captors and the truth is finally revealed. It was Colonel Richard and his newly established intelligence division all along. The masked men in black that have been giving us trouble were actually his goons. He captured the professor in order to make him develop a way to control the Black Orbment, referring to it as the Gospel. Keeping tight on his plans, the Colonel assures that this invention will bring the country riches like none ever before seen. Who wrote this line? After they leave, we bust out the professor and hightail it out of there, but not before the defeated goons pull the alarm. With our intended escape route blocked off, we flee into the base itself. Oh hey, the Capra family is here. Well, can't stay to chat, gotta get out of here. Luckily, the base's commanding officer, Mayor Sid, turns out to be a surprising ally. He reveals that the entire army has become under the control of Richard, with General Morgan under arrest and the Royal Guard being framed as traitors. He covers for us as we make our escape through a secret exit in his office. Just before we leave, he comments on how he knew we would rescue the professor ever since he learned we are the kids of Cassius Bright. He and Richard served under Dad when he was a colonel in the army and describes him as the hero who single-handedly saved the kingdom from Erebonia 10 years ago. Well, that's cool and all, but we gotta split. As we make ready for a life as fugitives in the name of the SAIS Workers' Revolution, we're stopped by Agate. Apparently our faces aren't known and it'll be easier to avoid detection with fewer people, so Agate will handle keeping the professor and Tita safe. Meanwhile, we're giving a request by the professor. Go to the capital and inform the Queen of the Colonel's actions and the Gospel. To fulfill Professor Russell's request, we need an audience with the Queen. But as the intelligence division has tightened security in the entire city, we can't even get inside the castle. Luckily, the prize for the annual martial arts tournament is a dinner at the castle, and our friend Jen is looking for teammates. We just need a fourth member, and hey, Olivier is in town and has nothing better to do. How auspicious. Most RPGs crawl to a snail's pace in their final chapter, but this is really brisk. There's none of the busy work of other chapters. Gransel is nice, it feels like a proper big city. Everything is larger. The Opal Factory, the weapon store, even the guild has 3 floors. There's not a lot of new characters to meet, but to be honest, at this point I'm glad we can just focus on what has already been established. It feels like we finally get a payoff for all the friends and allies we've made along the way. Everyone's here. We corroborate information about the impending coup with Nile, get into contact with Julia from the Royal Guard that has been driven underground, and all the cool braces from the other chapters have gathered to participate in the big tournament. Let's take this opportunity to talk a bit about Estelle and Joshua. I love me a good duo, and these two don't disappoint. They're easily the heart of this game, and I can't help but gush about them. Normally, RPG protagonists tend to be somewhat subdued, since they need to go along with whatever the plot calls for. But Estelle and Joshua are very much characters in their own right. Estelle is brash, emotional and impulsive, Joshua is level-headed and rational. And they get to act on their personalities since they balance each other out. When we need some righteous anger to spur us to action, Estelle takes the lead in a scene. When we need some mature resignation, Joshua reins her in. It makes the bread and butter dialogue of the game engaging while not curtailing the forward momentum of the plot. I really appreciate how much storytelling that's been done through their gameplay representation. In combat, Estelle kinda sucks, to be honest. She's flexible and can fit most roles reasonably well, which is useful when the party composition constantly changes. But unlike every other character, she lacks some unique strength or playstyle. In comparison, Joshua is useful throughout the game. He is the capable one, whereas Estelle still needs time to find her own. It's a great way to show us what the narrative is telling us. While they level nominally at the same rate, Joshua learns his crafts slightly earlier than Estelle, so he just always feels a bit more powerful. In the early game, his dual strike allows him to double his damage output. When physical attacks begin to fall off in effectiveness, he gets Flicker, an AoE craft that allows him to delay the turns of enemies. And to cap it off, in the final chapters, he learns Evil Eye, a truly giant AoE craft that also delays. And his upgraded S-craft, Black Fang, targets every enemy on screen. Slap on some accessories that recover CP on him and you're basically set. Estelle's crafts are much more situational. In the beginning, Hurricane gives you access to easy AoE damage, but it's quickly eclipsed in damage by arts. Her final craft, Heartbreak, is pretty useful since it can impede enemy crafts, something Joshua can't do naturally. But guess what? Nearly every companion can also do that. I think it's only Jin and Tita who also can't impede. So it's not much of an edge. But I still love her. Her crafts just look and feel so good. Looking over my footage, I finished so many fights by using her upgraded S-craft since it just looks so fucking good. In general, her animations are so evocative. That thwop of her basic attack never gets old. Something that is also noteworthy is how much these two change over the course of the game. Going back to the prologue, it can be shocking to see how immature Estelle is. She throws tantrums when an adult asks her for basic stuff, boasts and brags at children, and has trouble seeing past her own troubles and experiences. And as with the romance, there is no singular dramatic event that changes her. It's just nice, subtle development throughout the entire game. And while Joshua was mature from the get-go, he's also changed by this journey. As the story progresses, it becomes apparent that he might be less stable than we've been led to believe, and some of the events of the game clearly has him shaken. And since we were just speaking of their crafts, Joshua's becomes progressively more ominous. Like this feels villain-coded. The tournament fights are pretty fun. Antagonists from the previous chapters show up, like the Ravens and the Capua family. And getting to fight a team consisting of all the other senior bracers you've met so far is a pretty cool mirror match situation. After winning the tournament, we were invited inside the castle, where we also get to greet all the mayors from around the country. At the dinner itself, Colonel Richard finally spills the beans on what is going on. This is a coup. With the Queen's supposed poor health as the pretense, Duke Dunan will replace her as the new monarch, with Richard pulling the strings from the shadows. With total control of the country, we can expect him to turn Liberal into a militarized country with war taxes, forced conscriptions, and the development of new orbital weaponry. Alan Richard is a great antagonist. So many characters comment that even if they saw the red flags with what the intelligence division was doing, they still trusted Colonel Richard. He's charismatic, talented, and an old acquaintance of Dad. He can't possibly be a villain, can he? And when you meet him, he's nice. It's hard to really hate him. Even his overarching plot is not actually that insidious. Making a militarized nation is not a nice thing, but it's a legitimate policy based on the circumstances. Both Richard and Queen Alicia want what's best for the nation, they just disagree on how to achieve that. If the colonel hadn't used shady methods to achieve his coup, we would basically not have any grounds for opposing him. He is wrong and needs to be stopped, but he also has that flair of the hero of another story, and that makes him compelling. After the dinner, you sneak into the Queen's chambers dressed as maids. Ha! You thought Joshua dressing up during chapter 2 was just a throwaway scene? Psych! Everything in this game is connected. Talking with the Queen, she confirms a lot of what we have been suspecting. But more surprisingly, she also knows our dad. Is there anyone this guy isn't acquainted with? As she tells the story of how he saved the kingdom 10 years ago, she also lays out his reasoning for quitting the military. During his heroic operation to save the country, Estelle's mother was killed in the crossfire, and Cassius blames himself for not being able to protect her, spurring him to become a bracer instead. And poignantly, that mirrors Estelle's reason to become a bracer. We might assume she was inspired by Cassius, but back in the prologue she tells the story of how her mother died to protect her and that it spurred her on to become someone capable of protecting the people she cares about. Both father and daughter took up the staff to carry on her legacy. Lastly, the Queen also explains that there's likely a large artifact buried beneath the castle and that it might be the reason for the Colonel's need for the gospel. Currently, Richard is holding key figures in check with strategic hostages, among them the Queen's granddaughter, Princess Claudia, who she tasks us with saving. Man, think about how far we've come. From fighting crop munchers to saving the heir to the throne on the request of the ruling monarch. At this point in time, Jin also reveals that he's in Liberl on the behest of Dad. Cassius had to leave the country, so he called in a favor to get Jin, an A-rank bracer, to come and make sure things were fine in his absence. And this really is Jin's chapter. He gets a lot of cool moments that shows he's more than just a big dude, but a true master of martial arts. We quickly gather that the hostages are held in a villa on the outskirts of Gransel, and after gathering our allies, we storm the premises and rescue the princess. And lo and behold, the princess was Chloe all along. Who would have guessed? With the hostages out of the picture, we plot out how to retake the castle and save the queen. Oh, and Shara is here as well, along with Olivier. We split into 3 teams. Joshua and the boys infiltrate the castle through a secret sewer entrance, while the Royal Guard and bracers distract the main forces. That just leaves Estelle, Shara and Chloe to sweep in on a captured airship and rescue the queen. There's this weird bit of the game where it becomes really preoccupied with gender for some reason. When we're sneaking into the Queen's chambers, there are multiple scenes where Estelle and Joshua get sexually harassed. When we discuss the coup with the Queen, she theorizes that part of the Colonel's motivation is that Claudia was set up to be heir to the throne, and that 2 successive female monarchs would be seen as a sign of weakness. This culminates here at the confrontation with Duke Dunan, where he has a misogynistic rant towards the all-female party, after which we get to kick his ass. And I'm sort of confused by this thing, because what's the purpose really? It's a great way to show how shitty the villains are, but it's kinda a cheap shot. Estelle is constantly lambasted throughout the entire game for her mannerisms and actions being unwomanly. And when she begins to realize her budding feelings of romance, it's seen as part of her growth as a woman. Like, I don't know, gun to my head, I'd say the game is largely pretty pro-traditional gender roles. So this section is really just saying gender discrimination and sexism, that's wrong, but the causes are good. Anyways, a cool little thing about this fight is that the following cutscene changes depending on whether you knocked out the Duke or not. Neat. When we get to the Queen, she's guarded by none other than the Mask Commander. He's as enigmatic as ever, and as we prepare to square off on the top of this terrace, he throws off his mask and reveals his Bishonen looks. This fight is very dramatic, but fuck me, he's a challenge. They really nail the feeling that he's a player character, but way overleveled. He even has access to high level arts, stuff that you can't even get in this game. He uses all the same sort of bullshit strategies that you might have thought up. He can cancel your moves, inflict annoying status effects, cast protective arts, and just to tip it off, he'll regularly just heal himself if he gets hurt too much. He even has an S-craft. And while he's a big challenge, you don't have to beat him. Either way, he'll drop the name Hamel before peacing out. So the Queen is safe and the boy squad has joined up again. But now we have more pressing matters to attend to. The Colonel is after the Orole. The what now? The Orole, silly. One of the Septerion's divine gifts from Adios herself, gifted to mankind and said to be able to control the earth, seas and sky. Remember? And as the Queen predicted, the Colonel is convinced that it can be found in the depths below the castle. Seizing the castle was just a pretense for being able to build a hidden elevator in the treasury. It's locked, but Professor Russell shows up with Tita and Agate in tow just in time to fix it for us. This is also the final opportunity to get BP, as your last jobs automatically get reported. If you've been doing a good job, you've already reached the highest rank possible, but you have a lot of leeway. I answered a few things wrong and even missed some jobs here and there, and despite that I had way more points than necessary. And that's the great part of the BP system. It's rewarding, but not punitive at all. You honestly don't lose out on anything that important if you don't get the points, but it makes you care about your performance on the job. And so we ride down to the very definitive final dungeon. We're finally together with every companion. And for the first and only time we get to pick who we take along with us. The dungeon is not terribly exciting and the enemies here are kinda tedious to fight, but there is something mysterious about all this. Why are there these ancient ruins down below the castle, and what the hell are these autonomous machines? This must be from the ancient society we've heard about, but they should have disappeared thousands of years ago. All game long everything has been very grounded and mundane, so the appearance of a proper RPG dungeon in the finale feels grand and exciting. At the end of the dungeon we finally confront Colonel Richard, and he gives us his villain speech about how the country is doomed if we don't have some sort of deterrence against the larger nations of Erebonia and Calvert. And this deterrence could be the Aurole, the Shining Ring. And right here at the end of the narrative we get a final twist from Joshua asking the Colonel, how did you even know it was down here? I think I'm so used to villains just operating on some vague omniscience that it's kinda cool to have the question asked. And most importantly, Richard doesn't know it himself. Even the mastermind behind the coup d'etat was just a pawn in a grander scheme. We fight and kick his ass, but it's too late. The gospel activates and the machine announces that the first seal is broken and that the device towers have been activated. Before we can ponder what that means, a giant robot attacks. I'm of two minds on this. On one hand it feels a bit lazy to pull out a generic big boss enemy with no build up. But on the other hand there is something alien about this thing. You have spent the entire game fighting enemies that use these pre-rendered sprites, and then this thing suddenly pops up in full 3D. And I think it does add to the mystery, because what is this? Is it the Shining Ring? I mean, it's powerful but not overwhelmingly so. It seems like it was defending the mechanism, but why was it sealed away then? Anyways, we beat it up, and of course it has a second phase where it transformed into a cooler looking form. And after beating that, we're finally, well fuck me, it's still moving. We're all spent from fighting it twice, so Richard tries to buy us time to flee. Man, he's so cool. And just as he's about to get killed, he's saved. And it's fucking dead. With a single strike he cripples the robot and allows for us to finish it off. And what a wonderful bookend this is. We've come this far, but in the end Dad still has to bail us out of trouble. I fucking love Cassius. It's like the entire universe is playing a cosmic joke on Estelle. The entire game is basically a huge layup to rub it into your face that your embarrassing doofus dad is so important and cool that national emergencies erupt when he's not around. Sorry Estelle, this is Cassius' world. The rest of us are just living in it. One thing that I appreciate about this final scene is that even with his help, it's still us that do the heavy lifting. Our effort isn't invalidated by him being here, which is nice. And so the kingdom is saved, and we have finally earned our qualifications to become senior bracers. After the chaos the coup attempt has caused, the military will need to be reorganized, so Cassius is going to return to the Royal Army to spearhead the effort. But peace has been restored, and we've achieved all of our goals. But hey, the game isn't over yet. It's the annual celebration of the Queen, and we get to roam around the festivities and do a final check-in with everyone. It's a neat little victory lap, perfectly in the spirit of the game. And when you're done, we sit down with Joshua and talk about the future. Estelle steps out for a bit, and oh hey, it's Professor Alba. Completely forgot about this guy. What's up, boss? What? It was Alba all along. He has been manipulating people's memories, and with a snap of his finger he has somehow returned some of Joshua's past to him. With the spell broken, Joshua reveals the professor's true name and role. He's Weissman the Faceless, an anguish for something called Ouroboros. And in return, Weissman calls Joshua by his true name, Joshua Astray, Enforcer number 13, known as the Black Fang. Joshua's talents and capacities were a product of his former life. Weissman gleefully torments him with the truth. All these years with the Brights, Joshua has unknowingly been acting as a spy. The reason why it was possible to lure Cassius away from LeBeurle was because of the information he has been supplying. With Joshua in shock, the professor leaves with a reminder that there is always a place for him in Ouroboros. As Estelle returns, Joshua is seemingly acting normal, but we know him well enough by now to tell that something is wrong, and so can Estelle. Back at the castle, Estelle decides to confront him about it. And as a final bookend, we hear Joshua playing his harmonica outside. Joshua finally reveals his past. At some unknown point in his childhood, he became broken. The only thing he could do was to play the harmonica until someone, who we can assume to be Weissman, came along and fixed him. But in this process he turned him into an assassin that did heinous acts of violence on command. One of these orders was to kill Cassius, but he was unable to beat the S-rank bracer and was cast aside by Weissman's organization. Joshua considers himself to be stained beyond salvation and announces that he'll leave to deal with Weissman. Anguished at this proclamation, Estelle finally tells Joshua the thing she has been struggling to find the courage to say. She loves him. In response, Joshua kisses her, but before she can respond to this surprising show of affection, the taste of the kiss turns sour as she realizes that he's tricked her into swallowing a fast-acting sedative. This scene is wild. Joshua is our sweet boy, and here he goes complete psycho. Like, look at this creepy smile. But it's not in a haha, I'm evil now sort of way. Kissing is still only for it to incapacitate her. That's not just a sneaky trick. He could have dealt with her in any number of ways, but he knowingly preys on her feelings to break her down emotionally. It's a way to make sure she doesn't follow him by deliberately shocking her with his apparent callousness. And it's poignant how this shows just how much Joshua doesn't understand Estelle's feelings. He's thinking that this stunt would irrevocably break her image of him, that she would be so hurt that she would stop loving him. But that's not at all how Estelle operates. Instead, this just confirms two things. One, he actually does reciprocate her feelings on some level. And two, she was right to worry about him. He's so clearly not in his right mind. Joshua himself sees this change in behavior as him returning to his quote-unquote real self, and that his prior persona was a mask. But Estelle, who has spent so much time with him and knows him intimately, will obviously come to the conclusion that something is wrong, that something must have happened to provoke this. Despite their growth, this scene highlights their fundamental flaws as characters. For all his competencies, Joshua simply doesn't understand how people think and feel, and won't trust other people with his troubles and seek out help from friends and family. And while Estelle is clearly in the right, she is incapable of actually stopping Joshua from leaving. No matter how she begs and pleads, it won't matter. It's might makes right, and in that game Joshua has her beat. Everything Estelle has done was to protect people, but in the end she can't help the most important person of all from hurting themselves. And in a poignant form of irony, this is the first time Joshua is truly honest about his feelings. But he's only able to do so because he doesn't have to deal with the consequences of his words. In a sense, this scene reflects the final part of growing up, realizing that the world is bigger than you thought and that there is a capacity for cruelty out there you couldn't begin to imagine as a child. And of course, this is not the last word on that subject, but it is the cliffhanger that we end this story on, and man, what a way to go. This epilogue is so good that it kinda overshadows the rest of the game. And I don't blame people for this conclusion being their primary takeaway. It's so rare for games to have satisfying finales, and cliffhangers are especially hard to pull off without it coming off as a cheap trick. I've heard people describe this story as slow-paced, and I honestly don't understand that assessment. On the contrary, I think the pace is very brisk with every scene driving the plot forward. Just on a personal note, but for the sake of this video, I've had to abbreviate a lot of the plot, and it's been surprisingly tough to do because there are so many ideas and plot points packed into most scenes. It's very economical, and I really appreciate how it doesn't waste your time. It's also just great to play a game where the main thread is actually something tangible and not some vague nonsense. When everything is laid out on the table, Richard's plan is extremely straightforward. What makes the story engaging is pulling on the threads of his plot and unraveling the reasons why. It's not actually the coup as a twist that is interesting, but what it tells about our principal characters. The entire game has been about dependence and self-reliance. The explicit aim of this entire journey has been for our two heroes to grow into capable people. And they do become that in a sort of juvenile way. In a sense, Brazos kind of represents the crystallized version of the game's ideal person. Highly capable individuals who act independent of authorities for the benefit of the common people. But this drive for self-dependence can be taken too far. On a broader scale, this is showcased with Richard's plot to ensure our national sovereignty, with the consequence of turning us into a worse version of ourselves and compromising our values. But the game also undercuts the message in a way that I'm not entirely sure is on purpose or not. Like, let's look at Richard's plot. What propels him into this gunpowder treason plot is the realization that Liberal can't sustain itself without the genius of Cassius Bright. And he is admonished for this notion by both the Queen and Cassius himself. Rebelling Erebonia during the war was not due to the effort of a single man, but by working together. And the peace that was achieved was not due to overwhelming force, but diplomacy. But I think Richard is kind of proven to be partially right. In the end, Cassius does rejoin the military, since it had been stagnating after his departure, and the hazy succession of the throne did leave the country kind of vulnerable. On Alicia's death, she would either be replaced by the hilariously incompetent Dunan or the absent and unwilling Claudia. You could make the argument that the only thing Richard did wrong was that his plan got hijacked by mind-controlling supervillains. And yeah, as stated earlier, that's partly why he's a compelling antagonist, but it feels weird that the game doesn't present a political alternative. We're fighting for the status quo, not a better tomorrow. Instead, we're literally restoring the rightful rule of a monarch. And I'm not saying that Richard's plan is the better option, clearly not. But it feels like a false dichotomy that the choice is between a hereditary monarchy or a police state. It's a way of justifying something by presenting us with a worse alternative. And that also ties into this final scene with Joshua. At the finish line, we're told that Estelle isn't truly independent and has really been relying on Joshua this entire time. There's still something that she's lacking, and it's this thing that makes her unable to keep Joshua from leaving. And just from this game, I'm honestly not sure what it is she's missing. Is she not capable enough yet, or did her failure to reach out to Joshua and be honest about her feelings in time cause this? I think that's an open question that is left for the sequel to answer, and it does leave you curious about the direction of the story. And this is not meant as a criticism of the plot. I think it shows the strength of the narrative that you can pick it apart like this and still find things to ponder and appreciate. All because the game has crafted a believable world. A highly stylized one, sure, but one where it feels rewarding to poke at the edges. People like me will call this game one of the greatest of all time. But even in that sphere of opinion, I think the reputation of this first Trails in the Sky game is misaligned. Even its biggest fans will often repeat this sentiment that not much happens in the story and that the focus is more on Estelle and Joshua themselves. Or that the gameplay is primitive and unengaging. And I just couldn't disagree more with that. The game is not just about the main pair. Their experiences are a lens through which we relate to the world. The episodes of the game are different reflections of what it means to grow into adulthood, professionally, socially, and emotionally. There is a lot going on in the plot at any given time, with multiple plot threads weaving in and out of each other. And even with this in mind, I don't even think it's the story itself that draws people into this world. I think people get lost in the trappings of the coming-of-age narrative as the main meat of the plot, when that is just the frame for telling a rich story about how we relate to each other as people with mutual agency. Because that is truly the difference between being a child and an adult, someone with the power to affect the world around them, or someone who has to rely on those very same people. And I don't even think the game is great because of some inherent quality in the story itself. No, the reason why this game is so effective is all the small touches, the commitment to making you feel like Estelle, putting you into her headspace. The entire framework with separate regions, a clear time frame, a tightly controlled player party, all that is in service of grounding you in a moment-to-moment experience. Unlike other games, you're not constantly thinking about a forward-facing mechanical loop, your mind wandering as you mentally go through the list of things you need to be doing. I think that's why the game doesn't bombard you with 1,000 side missions or extra activities. The gameplay mechanics are there to underscore the narrative, not the other way around. In the opening for this video, I said that it can be hard to pin down exactly why this game is good, but I think this is the answer. For me, this game is untouched in the sense of immediacy, the sense of directly engaging with the story and world. This is substantiated by the narrative itself being tightly paced with few superfluous elements. And despite these factors, the game allows itself the space to breathe. You're not rushed forward or railroaded into specific interactions. There's always small nooks to find and make your own, and this allows you to make meaningful personal connections to the world of the game. This balance is so hard to get right, and it's even more difficult to put into words. Even as I say this right now, I'm worried that I've not been able to communicate this experience properly. But I think it's important to try, because I feel like we tend to hyper-focus on the value of specific design elements instead of the overall balance between them. This game spawned an entire new sub-series, and I think that overshadowed what made it great in the first place. It has gotten that reputation as the weird first game in an otherwise great series, but I think it deserves to be known as a masterpiece by its own merit. And I hope this video might make you appreciate why. Because there is nothing quite like traveling around the world alongside Estelle and Joshua. If you made it through this entire video, I will sincerely say thank you so much. I really appreciate that you decided to spend your time with me, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this game. And also, if you like this video and would like to see me tackle the next games in the series, let me know. Making a video like this took quite a bit of time and effort, so any form of validation is a huge boost to my motivation to continue doing this.